It was one of those cold evenings when the streets looked almost deserted, the air heavy with mist, and the lamps along the roadside flickered weakly as though struggling against the darkness. In a tiny corner of the city, at the edge of a neighborhood where no one with wealth would ever think of setting foot, lived a poor young girl named Elena. She was barely 20, fragile in frame, yet strong in will, a girl who had learned to fight with life's cruelties at every turn. She lived alone in a small wooden house that barely stood against the winds, its roof patched with tin, its windows cracked, and the walls carrying the stories of countless winters. Her parents had died when she was still a child, leaving her with no inheritance other than memories and the strength to keep going. To make ends meet, she worked long hours at a local cafe, serving coffee and bread to people who never looked her in the eye, people who never imagined that behind her quiet face was a heart that dreamed of more. Dreams she buried every day beneath her struggles for survival. On this particular night, as she walked back from work, her scarf wrapped tightly against her neck, she saw two figures standing near her broken gate. Her heart skipped a beat in fear at first, for strangers rarely wandered into this part of the city, and if they did, it wasn't for good reasons. One was a tall man, his shoulders broad, his coat expensive-looking though dirtied by travel, and beside him stood a small boy no older than 7, shivering slightly, his hand clasped tightly in the man's. They looked out of place, almost as though they had walked out of a different world and stumbled mistakenly into hers. The man spoke first, his voice deep yet heavy with exhaustion. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his eyes locking with hers in a way that startled her. "We've been traveling all day, and the hotels nearby are either full or too far for my boy to reach tonight. Would you perhaps allow us to stay here for just one night? We'll leave at sunrise, I promise." Elena froze. She had nothing much herself, no space, no comfort, no luxuries. Her house was hardly fit for her, let alone guests. But when her eyes fell on the boy, pale and trembling from the cold, her heart softened instantly. She couldn't imagine turning them away. "I don't have much," she said softly, her voice carrying both apology and sincerity. "But you can stay. At least you'll be warm." She opened her door, and the man and his son stepped into her little world. The room smelled faintly of wood and bread. A fire crackled weakly in the hearth, and though the furniture was worn, it gave an impression of care. Elena hurried to warm water and offered them a simple meal, bread, soup, and a slice of cheese she had saved for herself. The boy's eyes lit up at the sight, and the man's expression softened into something almost grateful, though he tried to conceal it under his composed, serious face. They introduced themselves briefly. The boy's name was Ethan, cheerful despite his tiredness, and the man simply said his name was Adrian. He gave nothing more away, and Elena, polite as she was, didn't press for details. They sat together, sharing food, sharing silence, until slowly a gentle conversation began to bloom. Ethan giggled at Elena's attempts to cheer him, and Adrian watched quietly, a flicker of something unexplainable in his eyes, a kind of wonder he hadn't felt in years. He saw in her a kindness that was not common in his world, a selflessness that money could not buy. As night deepened, Elena gave up her own bed for the boy, tucking him in with a blanket she had mended countless times, and sat by the fire to keep watch. Adrian insisted she rest, but she only smiled faintly and shook her head. "You're strangers," she said, half teasing, half honest. "I'll sleep here. It's safer that way." But what she did not know was that the man she had welcomed with such innocence was no ordinary wanderer. Adrian was a powerful CEO, one of the richest men in the city, owner of companies that shaped skylines and controlled markets. But tonight, stripped of his usual aura, he was just a father traveling with his son, seeking humanity in a world where people bowed to him only for wealth and power. He studied Elena quietly, the way she moved with humility, the way she spoke with sincerity, the way she offered warmth without asking for anything in return. And for the first time in a long while, Adrian felt something stir within him that his wealth had never been able to give him. Peace. The hours passed. The fire slowly dimmed and silence fell upon the house, broken only by the faint breathing of Ethan as he slept peacefully. Adrian remained awake for a while, his mind filled with questions, his gaze often drawn to Elena's calm face as she dozed lightly by the fire. He wondered why she had trusted them so easily, why she had given without hesitation. why she had not once asked who he was or what he could give in return. And though he didn't know it yet, this night would change both their lives forever. The sun rose gently, casting golden light through the cracks of the little house. Elena woke to the sound of birds outside and the faint laughter of Ethan, who was already up, playing with a worn-out wooden toy he had found on the shelf. She smiled softly, her heart strangely warmed by the sight of the boy filling her home with joy, a sound she had not heard in years. Adrian was sitting quietly at the table, watching his son, sipping the tea Elena had made. He looked different in the daylight, his sharp features illuminated, his presence more commanding, though he still carried the air of a man weighed down by responsibility. As they shared breakfast, just bread and milk, Adrian finally spoke, his tone serious. "You didn't ask me who I was last night. Most people would have." Elena looked at him, her eyes calm yet curious. "It didn't matter," she replied. "You needed help. That's all I needed to know." Those words struck him deeply. In his world, every act of kindness came with expectation, every smile with calculation. Yet here was a girl who had nothing, yet gave everything without hesitation. For a moment, Adrian wanted to reveal the truth, that he was not just a man but a CEO whose name commanded respect. But something held him back. Perhaps it was the desire to see her treat him simply as a man, not as a title. As he prepared to leave, Adrian took out a thick envelope from his coat pocket, filled with money. He placed it on the table. "For your kindness," he said firmly. But Elena's face changed instantly. She pushed it back toward him, shaking her head. "No," she said gently but with surprising strength. "I didn't do it for money. Keep it." Adrian was stunned. No one had ever rejected his money before. He searched her eyes and saw no greed, no hidden motive, just sincerity. "At least allow me to do something for you," he insisted. She smiled faintly. "If you truly wish to, then remember this night. Remember that not everyone in the world is driven by wealth. Sometimes we give simply because it's right." Her words etched themselves into his mind like a silent oath. He left with Ethan shortly after, but as he walked away, he knew this was not the end. Something about that girl, about her house, about her quiet strength, would not let him forget. Days later, Elena returned to her routine. Work, survival, quiet nights alone. She thought little of Adrian and his son, though their memory sometimes crossed her heart. What she didn't know was that Adrian had already set plans in motion. Using his vast resources, he discovered everything about her life, not to intrude, but to understand the girl who had shown him kindness without knowing who he was. He learned of her struggles, her loneliness, her sacrifices, and slowly he began to appear again, sometimes at the cafe where she worked, sometimes passing by her street. Always humble, always quiet, but always there. One evening, weeks later, he finally revealed the truth. Standing before her humble house once again, he looked at her with steady eyes and said, "Elena, that night you gave us shelter. You didn't know who I was. But I think you deserve to know. I am Adrian Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Enterprises." Elena froze, her eyes wide, disbelief rushing through her. She looked at him, then at Ethan, then back at him, trying to reconcile the man she had known with the figure she had just learned of. But Adrian quickly raised a hand. "Don't let the title change how you see me. That night I was only a father lost and in need. And you reminded me of something priceless, that kindness still exists. That humanity is not dead." Tears welled in her eyes, not because of his wealth or his name, but because she realized that her simple act had touched a man who lived in a world far beyond hers. He then spoke the words that would forever change her life. "I don't want to just thank you. I want to offer you a new beginning, not because of pity, but because I see in you someone extraordinary, someone this world has overlooked." And as Elena stood there, her heart overwhelmed, her life at the edge of transformation, the story had only just begun. And dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, because more stories like this are waiting for you. Stories of kindness, of fate, of love that comes when least expected. Join us and let's journey together.